Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the July Economic Development and Industrial Corporation of Boston Board meeting. At this time, the Boston Planning and Development Agency is continuing to host public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. For more information and updates, please visit bostonplans.org. The Open Public Meeting Law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications at Xfinity Channel 24, RCN Channel 13, and Verizon Fios Channel 962. It's also being live streamed at boston.gov/cable. I will now take a roll call of members to begin the meeting. Mr. Monahan?
Present.
Dr. Landsmark?
Present.
Okay. And Mr. Miller is not here yet, so we'll just give him an I. Priscilla Rojas am present. So with that, let's start with agenda item number 1. Request authorization for the approval of the minutes of the June 15th, 2023 meeting. A motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Item number 2, request to execute and deliver a memorandum of agreement with the City of Boston, acting by and through its property management department, authorizing the services of and payment for physical security and emergency response services provided by the Municipal Protective Services and Municipal Operations for properties owned by the Economic Development and Industrial Corporation of Boston, doing business as Boston Planning and Development Agency. Laura.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, Chief Jemison, and members of the board for the opportunity to speak with you today. As this board has authorized via multiple contracts and budgeted investments, the BPDA is implementing a comprehensive security program for our entire real estate portfolio. As one measure to ensure excellent stewardship of public property, we're continuing our partnership with the Municipal Protective Services through these memorandums of agreement with the City of Boston's Property Management Department. The MOAs document our long-standing relationship with the munis. Their uniformed officers preserve order, respond to critical events, and enforce policies at multiple locations, including the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park, 2 Boylston, 43 Hawkins, and 7 Palmer. I'll make a request regarding the BRA properties later today. There are a few improvements in this MOA that I'd like to highlight, which with huge thanks to Lauren and other colleagues at the BPDA, along with the staff in property management. This is our first multi-year agreement, which provides a solid basis for our partnership through fiscal year 2026, but also has flexibility to make adjustments and changes as needed. We'll also pay a flat fee rather than reimbursement based on hourly rates, which makes our budget more predictable and ties our investment explicitly to the services and responsibilities of the Municipal Protective Services. Finally, those services and responsibilities have been defined in much greater detail, including centralized video surveillance and alarm management. This shared services model provides cost savings and increased collaboration with our sister agencies across the city. The estimated budget for this MOA is $701,639 approximately annually. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have any questions from the board? Hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Roll call. Second, yes. Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Item number 3, request authorization to advertise and issue a request for proposals to seek a vendor to implement a wraparound support framework that will support the Good Jobs Metro Boston Coalition participants. Abigail.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board for your time. My name is Abigail Cross. I'm Assistant Deputy Director at the Office of Workforce Development. We're requesting authorization to release an RFP to identify vendors that can provide a list of available supportive services, house funding requests from program case managers, and disperse funds to partner organizations to support Good Jobs Metro Boston Coalition participants. Last August, EDIC/OWD received $23 million in funding from the U.S. Department of Commerce's Economic Development Administration, or the EDA, for the Good Jobs Challenge program. In developing our Good Jobs Challenge grant, around $1 million in administrative funding was set aside to provide wraparound supportive services to program participants. This funding is intended to serve approximately 40% or 1,850 participants. This funding could not address all of a person's needs, and the aim is to apply the funding strategically to mitigate key unmet training-related needs, acknowledging that these may vary. A sample of the wraparound supportive services that will be provided with this funding include transportation, childcare, food, clothing and supplies, and communications. With the present RFP, OWD seeks to solicit a vendor that has the capacity to process requests and to disperse funds for the over 25 organizations seeking these supports for their participants, which OWD does not have the administrative capacity to do. EDIC and OWD has a total of $1,050,000 in Good Jobs Challenge funding to support participants using this wraparound supports framework. The estimated contract amount for this RFP is around $100,000 to $200,000, taking from the aforementioned funding pool. We plan to release the RFP on July 14th, 2023, or soon thereafter, and the performance period for the project will be from September 2023 to August 2025. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Abigail. Do we have any questions from the board? Okay, hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you. Item number 4, request authorization to advertise and issue an invitation for bids pursuant to MGLC 149 for inspection, testing, servicing, and full preventative maintenance of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems at the 12 Channel Street in the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. Laura.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair. As stated, we'd like to solicit competitive bids for HVAC maintenance at 12 Channel Street. These services will help us be an excellent landlord and neighbor, especially given the relocation of several staff recently to 12 Channel. As you know, 12 Channel is a 9-story masonry building constructed by the U.S. military in 1941 and currently utilized for light industrial manufacturing, office space, and storage. This invitation for bid will be publicly advertised, and the resulting contract will include all applicable wage requirements and will be awarded to the responsive and responsible bidder with the lowest total bid price. The awarded contract will have a term of 1 year with 2 one-year options to extend in an amount not expected to exceed $75,000 per year. And with that, thank you for your consideration, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Mr. Landsmark?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes. Thanks, Laura. Okay, item number 6, request authorization to enter into a 1-year contract with CDW LLC for a total cost of $90,093.14 for Adobe software licensing. Purnell.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. I have nothing additional to add. It's just a renewal, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, okay. Familiar with Adobe. So,
I think we need it.
Yeah, so any questions or comments from the board? Hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Madam,
Oh, yeah, Mark.
my apologies for being late, Brian Miller, and I'm present.
Awesome, thank you. We'll get you wrapped in, looped into the next agenda item. Okay, so let me just start a roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes. And
I'm
while-
sorry, Madam Chair, we skipped number 5. Can we
Did
go
we?
back?
We did, okay. Item number 5, request authorization to execute a contract with Rapid Flow Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $277,950 for storm drain cleaning and camera investigation in the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. Laura.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity to come before you yet again. As authorized by this board in April, BPDA staff issued an invitation for bid for storm drain cleaning and camera investigation in the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. To reiterate the background for this project, we're conducting a comprehensive assessment of the storm drainage system within the 190 acres of the Marine Park. That assessment will yield recommendations to advance climate resiliency and future capacity. In the meantime, it revealed the need for additional maintenance. Through a public competitive procurement process, we received 3 bids for this work. Rapid Flow Incorporated is a family-owned business based here in Massachusetts and is the responsive and responsible bidder with the lowest total bid price. The awarded contract will have a term of 1 year with 2 one-year options, with a total cost not expected to exceed $277,950, which is within or under our estimated budget. Thank you once again, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Laura. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes. Okay, let's go back to item number 7. Request authorization to transfer the director of Spark Boston position to the Community Engagement Cabinet. The EDIC will reimburse the city of Boston for actual costs, including salary, employment benefits, and fringe and programmatic costs. Samantha.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Director Jemison, and Madam Secretary. I'm Samantha Vidal, Deputy Director of Administration for the BPDA. Thank you for allowing me this time. I'm before you seeking approval for the transfer of the Spark Boston program from the EDIC to the City of Boston Community Engagement Cabinet. Spark Boston works to provide 20 to 35-year-olds the opportunity to participate in city government. The EDIC has historically been the fiscal agent for the Spark Boston program, while the program functionally focused on City of Boston community engagement. The city recruited a new director for Spark Boston, and we believe it is most appropriate for this program to be managed directly by the Chief of Civic Engagement. We are eager to continue our financial support for this program, and therefore we agreed to reimburse the City of Boston every 6 months through June 30th, 2024. This cost was included in the EDIC FY24 budget, and as this position historically was within the EDIC, the financial impact to the EDIC is neutral. Thank you for your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions or comments from the board? Hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Lanspool?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes. Good luck with the Spark program. As someone who came into to public service in that time frame of my life, I think it's a great way that we can incorporate more of our 25 to 30-year-olds. So
Thank you.
all right. Item number 8, personnel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Madam Secretary, and Director Jemison. I am Michael Kerr, the Director of Human Resources. We have a number of items for your consideration on the EDIC agenda with the exact details included in the board memos. We have 1 appointment in the Development Review Department, Zoe Shute, Project Assistant. We also have 14 status changes. In the Development Review Department, Mary Gattenby from Assistant to the Director of Development Review to Operations Manager. Quinn Valjic from Project Manager to Senior Project Manager. Scott Greenhow from Project Assistant to Project Manager. Tyler Ross from Project Manager to Senior Project Manager. In the Finance Department, Devin Wedge from Senior Grants and Budget Manager to Assistant Controller for OWD Operations. Dylan Darcy from Budget Manager to Senior Budget Manager. Robert Springer from Vendor and Supplier Diversity Specialist to Supplier Diversity Manager. Erica Rockman from Grants and Budget Assistant Manager to Grants and Budget Manager. Erickson Ramos from Grants and Budget Assistant to Grants and Budget Specialist. In the Office of General Counsel, Sienna Crawford from Real Estate Paralegal to Senior Paralegal. In the Planning Department, Mary Catler Gold from Planning Assistant, Zoning and Regulatory to Planner 1. And Adriana Lasso Harriet from Planner 1 to Planner 2. In the Real Estate Department, we have Natalie Dudek from Real Estate Development Officer to Senior Real Estate Development Officer. And in the Human Resources Department, Cassie Cavender from Human Resources Specialist to Human Resources Specialist Recruiting. We also have 5 departures. In the Office of Workforce Development, Lucero Castaneda, Assistant Director of Policy Worker Empowerment. In the Planning Department, Kenan Ryan, Deputy Director of Downtown Neighborhood Planning. In the Development Review Department, Erin Skibbins, Project Assistant. In the Director's Office, Orville Joseph, Compliance Specialist. And finally, in the Human Resources Department, Kiana Floyd, Human Resources Generalist. Thank you, and answer any questions if you have them.
Great. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes. Congratulations to everybody on their new roles, and thank you to all who are moving on from us. We really appreciate your contributions. So with that, I think, I know. We need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes, meeting adjourned. Okay. We'll now begin the BPDA portion of the meeting. Thank you for joining the July Boston Redevelopment Authority Board meeting. At this time, the Boston Planning and Development Agency is continuing to host public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. For more information and updates, visit bostonplans.org. The Open Public Meeting Law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office Cable Communications. At Xfinity Channel 24, RCN Channel 13, and Verizon Fios Channel 962. It's also being live streamed at boston.gov/cable. I will now take a roll call of the members to begin this meeting. Mr. Monahan.
Present.
Dr. Landsmark.
Present.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
And the chair is present. Okay. Item number 1, request authorization for approval of the minutes of the June 15, 2023 meeting. A motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes. Item number 2, request authorization to schedule a public hearing on August 17th, 2023 at 5 p.m. or at a date and time to be determined by the director to consider the proposed Unity Station condominiums project as a part of Bartlett Place Plan Development Area number 94. A motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes. Item number 3, request authorization to schedule a public hearing on August 17th at 5:40 p.m. or at a date and time to be determined by the director to consider the proposed First Amendment to the Boston College 2021 through 2023 Institutional Master Plan Project. A motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes. Item number 4, request authorization to schedule a public hearing on August 17th, 2023 at 5:50 p.m. or at a date and time to be determined by the director to consider the proposed master plan for Plan Development Area number 141, the Dorchester Bay City Project. A motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, motion passes. Okay, item number 5, request authorization to petition the Boston Zoning Commission to adopt Phase 2A of the definitions project, which updates and consolidates the definitions of applicable terms appearing in both Article 2 and non-2 articles of the zoning code. Cyrus and Kathleen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Secretary Polhemus, and Director Jemison. For the record, my name is Cyrus Maselli, and I am a planning assistant with the zoning reform team at the BPDA. And I'm here today to talk about the next phase of the agency's ongoing definitions project. Next slide, please. I'd like to start by giving a little context into the Boston Zoning Code's definitions. Prior to the start of the definitions project, the zoning code defined terms in multiple ways and in multiple locations. These terms could be found in both overarching sets of definitions, the former Articles 2 and 2A, which applied to large swaths of the code, as well as in the provisions of many non-definitions zoning articles, meaning the individual neighborhood or district articles of the code. Each of these sets of definitions evolve at different times and largely independent of one another. Having multiple sets of definitions with missing terms and subtle distinctions between definitions has long been a source of confusion for practitioners and laypersons alike. So to resolve this issue, the BPDA launched the Definitions Project. Next slide, please. The Definitions Project as a whole comprises multiple phases, which collectively seek to consolidate, standardize, and update the zoning code's definitions. Phase 1, which was adopted by the Boston Zoning Commission in June, was an important first step in the process as it consolidated Articles 2 and 2A into a single overarching set of definitions for the code, a new Article 2 that could serve as a foundation to build upon. Phase 2 of the project aims to further these efforts by standardizing and consolidating terms defined in both Article 2 and other non-2 articles of the code. Because some of these terms will require more substantive updates to resolve, this phase has been divided into two parts. Phase 2A, which we're talking about today, includes those terms requiring non-substantive updates to resolve. Phase 2 will tackle the terms requiring more comprehensive changes, including many of the dimensional terms, so to speak, including FAR, GFA, and building height. Phase 3, which will come later, will focus on modernizing our zoning definitions and creating a more user-friendly code. Next slide. Focusing in on today's content, it's important to first give some context into Phase 2A. As I've mentioned, in addition to Article 2, the zoning code defines terms in about 30 other neighborhood and district articles across the code. In total, 514 terms are defined throughout. Of those, 63 overlap between Article 2 and the non-2 articles. The majority of these overlapping terms, 48 to be exact, either have the same definition or only require small changes to resolve. And these are the items brought to you today. Next slide. The goal of Phase 2A is to consolidate terms defined in both Article 2 and the non-2 articles, which I've mentioned, where possible and applicable, to ensure that terms relevant to the entire zoning code are defined in Article 2, the overarching definition set alone. And a number of strategies were employed to accomplish this goal here in Phase 2A. So terms with incongruent definitions between sections were resolved in one of two ways. By either one, selecting or updating the Article 2 definition and removing the term from the applicable non-2 articles, or two, by retaining the definitions of the non-2 articles and removing the term from Article 2. Terms with consistent definitions between the various sections were handled by removing the non-Article 2 iterations from the code. If approved, these updates will further the BPDA's efforts to remove duplicate and incongruent language from the code, make definitions easier to update in the future, and continue to set a strong and holistic foundation for code updates to come. Please note that the updates proposed in Phase 2A will not substantively affect the meaning, function, or operation of the code. These updates went through a rigorous legal review to ensure this would be the case. Next slide, please. I'm now going to walk through a few examples that demonstrate the different types of approaches we took in addressing these issues. So this first example, Harbor Park, shows a case in which the existing Article 2 definition was retained, as it currently is. And for this, you can see that these definitions are similar, with Article 25A and Article 85 referencing either provisions of or the entire existing Harbor Park definition. And because of this, the existing Article 2 definition was retained while the others were removed. Next slide. A few definitions, though, required more substantial combining and editing because they contained more explicit contradictions. For example, the definition of downtown has multiple meanings across the code. While the Article 25A version references the existing Article 2 definition and thus can be removed, the Article 85 iteration differs by outlining a different area than that detailed in Article 2. And because of the policy implications to changing the Article 85 boundaries, which are relevant to demolition delay in the city, the Article 2 definition was updated to clearly reference the retained provisions of the Article 85 definition, ensuring no unintended consequences. Additionally, because the downtown iPod no longer exists, the provisions of Article 27D listed in Article 2 were removed as well. Next slide. There were also several definitions that were able to be removed from Article 2. And one of these is, the term facility of public assembly or accommodation. So as you can see here, these definitions vary widely, between the different articles. But because the non-Article 2 definitions outlined, ranging uses that only apply to specific cases and areas regulated by Chapter 91, and also because the uses ascribed to Articles 2 definition are regulated through different use categories in the code's tables, we felt it best for the non-2 articles to retain their more geographically specific definitions. Next slide. In addition to consolidating overlapping Article 2 and non-Article 2 terms, Phase 2A also proposes to update the definition of multifamily dwelling. While the term's current definition details different provisions for projects in base code and neighborhood districts requiring 3 or more units or 4 or more units, respectively, the new definition proposes a standardized approach requiring 4 or more units across the board. This update removes substantive duplication within the definition of multifamily dwelling and creates alignment in the regulation of MFR across the code. And because there are no existing base code districts that allow 1 or 2 family dwellings that do not allow 3 or more units, this could be changed without substantively changing the meaning or operation of the code. To kind of fill in the gap, a new 3-family use category with the same allowances as the existing MFR item has been added to the Article 8 use tables for consistency in the base code. And just to reiterate on this point, this update will not impact the existing regulation of housing throughout the code in either the base code or neighborhood articles. Next slide. You can see here a table showing the results of our base code residential use analysis. And while at first glance, the Article 8 tables highlight potential complications in the base code's S and R residential subdistricts, it's important to note that there are currently no existing instances of either subdistrict in the city, thus rendering their provisions obsolete. The S and R subdistricts are holdovers from the original provisions of the base code and were superseded citywide with the adoption of the code's neighborhood articles and through their associated redistricting efforts. So as you can see, the other districts' use allowances kind of give us the green light here to move forward. Next slide. Before we close out our presentation, it's important to note that this project, again, omits terms requiring more substantive updates, including those relating to affordable housing and dimensions. Phase 2A of the definitions project is meant to further streamline the structure of the code's definition section, not significantly change the meanings of terms. And while updates to these terms are needed, additional analysis and public process is required to ensure no unintended consequences. BPDA staff are currently in the process of analyzing potential updates to dimensional terms, and we expect that these will require a more substantive public process that we envision being undertaken in the near future before coming to the board. Next slide. And with that, we will close out. But before passing the mic over, I would also like to introduce Kathleen Onifer, the BPDA's interim director, deputy director of zoning reform, to the panel here. And just to tell you guys that, the two of us are glad to answer any questions you may have. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Cyrus and Kathleen, and to the entire team for all of the work done. And it was a lot of work. We've been following this effort on since we started it. So yeah, while we won't have references to dance halls and drive-ins, the work that you guys do is very much needed to trying to streamline, get efficiencies, and yeah. So quick question now. From, I guess, how comfortable are we that the terms are broad enough that we'd be able to grow into them, right? Like that it's, that we won't have to go through this exercise again in this same way. Like, and do we plan on a regular basis kind of revisiting these definitions to make sure they're still applicable? How'd that work?
Well, thank you, and I think that's a great question. I think part of the issue that we find ourselves in right now is that we have terms defined everywhere. These sets of definitions evolved kind of separately, independently of one another, which makes kind of keeping a lid on our definitions throughout the zoning code hard to do. So I think that ideally, we will find ourselves in a situation in which we have one body of definitions that will be able to apply to, the code as a whole. And in doing so, in establishing that kind of foundational piece there, we'll be able to more efficiently update terms over time as updates are required.
Great, but I think the second part of my question is just more of the review part. Is there a control? I'm an auditor. Is there a control in place whereby we have incorporated a regular review at the appropriate frequency of these definitions, right? Is more of the second question I was asking.
Certainly, there currently is not kind of a standard operating procedure for reviewing the set of definitions as a whole on a kind of rolling basis, but I think that is something that we can certainly explore implementing in future phases and moving forward here.
Awesome, thanks so much, and highly recommend it. It's a really good control, and it doesn't have to be the frequency should be appropriate of the review. So, okay, any questions or comments from the board? Okay, hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
We'll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 6. Request authorization to petition the Boston Zoning Commission to adopt a text amendment to the Boston Zoning Code to incorporate inclusionary zoning into the Boston Zoning Code. Amy.
Good afternoon, Chair Rojas, members of the board, Secretary Polhemus, and Director Jemison. My name is Amy Chambers. I am the planning director here at BPDA. I am joined today by Sheila Dillon, Chief of Housing for the City of Boston, and Caitlin Coppinger, Interim Housing Manager for the BPDA, to review Boston's inclusionary development policy and to petition you to recommend approval of a text amendment to incorporate it into our zoning code as Article 79, inclusionary zoning. Next slide, please. So what is inclusionary development? Next slide, please. Inclusionary development programs require market rate developments to create affordable units on or off-site, or in some cases, to require developers to pay into a fund, which would be set aside for the development of affordable units. The image on this slide exemplifies our current policy, which would require 3 income-restricted units in this 21-unit development. Next slide, please. For a bit of context, Boston's IDP, as we affectionately call it, was created by executive order during the Menino administration. It has been updated over time, most recently in 2015, where the current guidelines were established. In 2019 through 2021, a home rule petition was floated and passed, which would allow IDP into zoning. That petition requires that the provisions of the zoning text be reviewed and approved by City Council prior to going to the Zoning Commission. In 2022, a feasibility study was initiated by the Mayor's Office of Housing and RKG Associates to study the concept. The financial model enabled the city to test prototypical developments to understand the financial implications changing the existing IDP ordinance. This was a traditional pro forma analysis. It should be noted that the RKG Associates model uses both the internal rate of return and cash-on-cash calculations to evaluate financial feasibility. These measures are standard approaches to understanding the potential performance of a real estate investment. Next slide, please. I'd like to begin by explaining how our current policy works. Next slide, please. The current IDP policy applies to developments with 10 or more units that require zoning relief through the ZBA. The provisions of the policy are governed by zones across the city, seen in the image here. Next slide, please. The policy requires that 13% of units are supplied as income restricted on site, and that a higher number of units, 18% in zones A and B and 15% in zone C, are supplied if units are built off site. It should be noted that the current policy is generating above the 13% minimum. Developers are already building into their financial assumptions a greater commitment to more set-aside units than required. On average, the current process is generating a set-aside of 17% of units. Next slide, please. Because of the IDP, developers have created over 4,000 on-site and off-site income-restricted units, and 688 units are currently in construction. In addition, developers have made over $200 million in IDP contributions. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to go through the proposed text amendment, which would be added to the code. Next slide, please. The proposed text dictates that developments would not need zoning relief. Instead, the trigger for participation will be simply based on number of units. This threshold is lowered from 10 units to 7 units. The text maintains a 50-year affordability period, which is comparable to the current policy. It would allow developers to satisfy their obligations for those set-aside units through either square footage or the percent of total units, thereby allowing for the creation of larger size units to serve families. Units would be required to be indistinguishable in terms of finish or substantially similar in quality if built off-site. And the zoning text is proposed to go into effect October 1st, 2024. Next slide, please. Under the proposed zoning, rental requirements would include for small projects or IDP-only projects, those being projects that would be triggered by the 7 units but not necessarily fall under the BPDA small project, developers would be required to build 17% of either units or square footage at an average of 60% AMI with a maximum of 70% AMI. Developers would not be permitted to develop units off-site in this scenario. This text would allow for opportunities for developers to provide a full payout in lieu of incorporating units into the project, or a partial payment where the requirement for units is calculated to a fraction. Next slide, please. For rental requirements for large projects and PDAs, developers would have 2 options to develop on-site. They would either be required to develop 15% of units or square footage at an average of 50% AMI with a max 60% AMI, plus 3% of units or square footage for a set aside for voucher holders, or for a total of 18% of units or square footage, or they would be required to provide 17% of units or square footage at an average of 60% AMI with a max of 70% AMI plus 3% for voucher holders for a total of 20%. Developers in these developments would be permitted to develop off-site 20% of units or square footage at an average of 60% AMI, and likewise, they would have opportunities for full buyout and for partial if the requirement is calculated to a fraction. Next slide, please. This slide provides a sample demonstration for how IDP may apply to a 100-unit rental development. Under the current policy, 13 units would be developed at an average of 70% AMI. Under the new policy, with either option, more units would be developed at deeper affordability levels. Next slide, please. Inclusionary zoning would further provide requirements for homeownership projects. For small projects and IDP-only developments, on-site developers would need to provide 17% of units or square footage, with half of units at a maximum of 80% AMI and the remainder at a maximum of 100% AMI. Developers would not be permitted to develop off-site units. Next slide, please. For large projects and PDAs, developers would be required to provide 20% of units or square footage, again, half of which would be at a maximum of 80% AMI, and the remainder at a maximum of 100% AMI. With these developments, developers would have the option of developing off-site. Again, they would be required to provide the 20% of units or square footage. They would be provided with the option to develop either rental units at an average of 60% AMI or homeownership units, again, with half of which at a maximum of 80% and half at a maximum of 100% AMI. Next slide, please. Here again is a sample demonstration of how IDP may apply to a 100-unit condo development. Under the new policy, with either option, more units would be developed. Next slide, please. Finally, I'd like to provide you with more information related to our process. Next slide. In partnership with the Mayor's Office of Housing, BPDA hosted public meetings in January and May, and made changes to the proposed text in response to these meetings, the final text of which is before you tonight. With regard to next steps, we would take the text amendment after your vote tonight to the City Council for their vote, and then finally to the Zoning Commission for final approval. I want to take a moment to thank you for your time, and with that, Caitlin, Sheila, and I will take any questions you may have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy, and to the entire cross-functional team at the city who was involved in analyzing this. Look, I recognize that there are many strong views on kind of what is that right percentage to both address the significant housing need that we have, particularly affordable housing in the city, and still make Boston attractive for developers to want to invest in and make sure that it's financially feasible. Can you tell me a little bit, give me some insight on the process that the team went through to come up with this percentage?
I can try to answer that, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of you. So we're in full agreement that while we want to increase the amount of affordable housing in Boston, mixed income developments, we don't want to do so in such a way that we're going to impede market rate developers, because that's, it's very important to our economy and housing supply. So the city did hire a consultant, RKG and Associates, and they spent months working with developers, talking to advocates, but really looking at the variables that go into development, rents and costs to develop, and interest rates, and what land values were, and what a land value could, what one could expect using certain acreage, and how much FAR one could get. Lots of analysis, lots of discussion. And what's before you tonight is what we feel we can ask developers to do without harming development. They looked at lots of return scenarios, and we really made sure that we didn't push so far that we saw projects being infeasible. Now, that was a point in time, and we certainly recognize that variables have changed, but as interest rates have gone up, rents have gone up a lot too. So there's a lot of variables in real estate. They're always shifting and changing, but we really did our best to look at what we could extract, but at the same time, make sure that we had financial feasibility. So lots and lots of discussion with the real estate community.
Thank you for that insight. Can you tell me a little bit about who RKG is and kind of, you know, what they were able to kind of bring to this?
Sure. So before we started this, with both linkage, which you voted on earlier this year, and thank you for that, we put out an RFP looking for consulting firms that would help the city be able to analyze our unique variables, our development variables, and give us recommendations, build us a model that we could use to really look at this policy. We had two responses. One of them unfortunately dropped out, but we felt comfortable going forward with RKG. They're doing inclusionary development analysis throughout the country. They've done many local ones, but certainly they're working in major cities right now. So they really understand the issue, and they really spent their time, even though they're not Boston-based, they spent a lot of time here working with developers to understand our own unique economic conditions. And so they built us a feasibility model, like I said, looking at return on cost, internal rates of return, really stressing various real estate models, small and large, and across Boston. It's, you know, what's feasible in Alston under a certain condition is very different than what's feasible in the Back Bay under other conditions, but we really tried to come up with recommendations here today that generally allow feasibility to move forward, or projects to move forward. But we felt very comfortable with their credentials and who they work for and their references, that they were a very credible partner in this exercise.
Okay, thank you. Very helpful. Questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I have a question, and we all know how badly we need the affordable housing in the city. Has there been a review done, if we ask the developer, are we telling the developer that we need more affordable housing in their projects? How does that impact the market rate? Would that cause an impact to the prices, increase the prices on the market rate, or is that, how would that be impacted, I guess is my question.
I'm not 100% sure I understand, but certainly any requirements that we put on developers, there's certainly cost implications and feasibility implications. We wouldn't be honest if we said there wasn't, right? They're going to receive less revenue. They're going to receive less sales prices. So we know that. Part of this exercise was making sure that the requirements, what we were asking them to do through these potential changes, wouldn't be that wouldn't impact the development so much that it couldn't move forward. I may not be answering your question. If I'm not, I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe I'll just try it from another.
Okay, thank you.
I hear so many people that are looking to buy a home, get started in the city right now, that a couple both working, they don't qualify for the affordable housing, so their market rate, and trying to find something market rate in most of our neighborhoods now is really prohibitive for most young people trying to get going. My concern is if we cause a developer to have additional costs, do they push up those market rate units and push more people out of the ability to afford in Boston? I guess that's my question.
Sure. No, I understand that. We certainly hear that and we worry about that. It has been my experience, but that the market will dictate what things sell for and what things rent for. So developers aren't going to be able to, and they could certainly correct me on this, they're not going to be able to sell things or rent things for more than what the market will allow. So I believe it is the market that dictates. Now, things need to be feasible, right? And the returns need to be there for equity investors and developers. Otherwise, they don't have a feasible project. So they are going to have to push rents and sales to a point where the project makes sense for them and their investors, but they can't push it beyond what the market will bear. And that's typically, they're very close to what the market will bear and when they put together their pro forma and analysis. So it's my opinion that the market dictates what you're referring to more than the market will dictate the costs and sales more than this policy.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Chair. I just wanted to piggyback on that to add that speaking of the market and speaking of the kind of existing strain that there is on the market with regard to affordability, there is a finding that RKG had in their report that speaks a bit to the fact that with the right percent of affordable unit requirements, that there isn't really additional strain that ends up getting put on the high end of the market, but in the right places with that proper percentage, that increasing IDP or the opportunity that exists to increase IDP really only serves to kind of offset some of the high rent or high sales prices and still create that opportunity. So the finding that they really had was about making sure that we found the sweetest spot that didn't put additional pressure at the top of the market, but still allows for opportunity for us to ensure that we're being thoughtful in the creation of affordable units. Furthermore, I'd mentioned in the presentation that we've been paying attention to the policy as it's been in place to date, and the effective rate at which we're developing affordable units under the policy since it's been in its current iteration is approximately 17%. And so although on paper it looks like we're making a huge jump in terms of our percentage from the 13 up to the kind of average 20%, we're really making a much smaller increase in terms of kind of filling that gap and really just putting into place recommendations that we already have in practice.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. That's a really good observation and piece of data to have of what are we doing already. So 17%. So is that like 17% is the average of what we're doing for like projects now, or?
That's correct. And Chief Dillon, you can speak a little bit more to that.
No, that is correct. That is what the data shows, that through community process, through a lot of communities really looking to have projects provide more affordable housing, developers have stood up and are providing, on average 17% in their projects. Not every single one, but on average 17%.
And just to clarify that, 17% was the 6-month average up through BPDA board approvals from January 2023. So the projects that this board has recently been approving has all been at 17% IDP.
Yeah, that definitely tracks with my memory of what we've approved. Additional questions or comments?
I have a couple, Madam Chair. Either Sheila or Amy or Caitlin, that 17%, did that take into account, we know through state and federal tax credits that there are 100% of a project can be affordable, right? So are those numbers used to get you the 17% average?
Those do not include the 100% affordable projects.
So my question is similar to Brian's, and my concern is, I talk to a lot of developers, and they're extremely concerned and nervous, and with inflation on material, interest rates, and now the percentage increase for the affordables. We've all heard this, you can make it 50%, 50% of zero is zero, right? So 20%, 18% of nothing is nothing. And where is that fine line? So did RPG, through some confidentiality, actually take projects throughout the city in different neighborhoods? Your soft costs, your hard costs, and take a project right through the process and with the 18%. And at the end of the day, was that a project that was doable? Did they take on that risk?
It did look at hard costs, soft costs, Boston variables through in multiple development scenarios, large projects, small projects throughout the city. So that's exactly what they did. That was exactly what how their analysis was structured.
And is that analysis available?
Oh, yes, it's on the BPDA website. We've had multiple community meetings. It's been shared with the development community. Absolutely.
And those, like Brian mentioned, the money is going to come from somewhere, right? So you increase percentages here, and that makes the market rent costs go up. And in that analysis, did it show that properties are selling or renting for the numbers that now are new numbers? Because let's face it, the money's going to come from somewhere, and it's not going to come from developers. They're not in the business to lose money. It's not a hobby. Is that in that analysis that they actually showed that today sales in rentals are being sold and rented for these new numbers?
So the analysis was done, I want to say, I don't have the exact date, probably about 5 or 6 months ago. And as I mentioned, we know that interest rates have gone up slightly since the analysis was done, but rents last quarter also went up substantially. So there really wasn't an offsetting. I do want to mention too that there was a lot of interest from the advocates that these units serve lower income populations, and Amy went over that. And so when we looked at the 17%, and I can talk about the Section 8s in a minute, we really went back to RKG. We looked at our own numbers, and we said, if we drop the rents even lower, the returns are going to be more strained. So in response to that, we dropped the requirement on the lower income rental units to 15% below what we're seeing now, just to react to. So we're very careful with any requirement we were putting forward, that we were being very careful that we still had feasibility. And I want to mention that another, I think it's very innovative. We wanted to make sure that developers, because we do want development to happen, we're receiving the income they needed for feasibility. We introduced an idea that they could use mobile Section 8s for 2 reasons. One are the BHA mobile Section 8s pay very, very healthy high rents. They use small area FMRs, so the rent levels reflect the rents for that particular neighborhood. So they're FMR, fair market rents. They're very high rents. So we thought, and also too, it's very hard for mobile Section 8 holders, we know, to get into some of the inclusionary development units. So we thought this was an ingenious way to get more affordable units, or have our mobile voucher holders access these units, and at the same time generate more income for the development. So we really were very careful about making sure that the income, if we were requiring something, we were, for lower rents, we were bringing down the percentage required. And if we wanted to serve a lower income population, we were looking for the use of the vouchers to increase the rent levels. So all that to say is we were very careful, I believe, in our analysis, always keeping feasibility, at the top of mind.
And my final question on the same matter is, through that performer analysis, at the very end, was there a scenario that lenders or the equity or debt, they said that we would provide financing for this project?
So the entire feasibility analysis, just to give an overview, looked at a pro forma, which is how developers look at the financial feasibility of a project, and it really tested 2 different things. One, the cash on cash return, as well as the internal rate of revenue, which are the two biggest things for developers to take a look at whether or not they're interested in a project. And we ran this model for a number of things. So for what we are proposing today in front of you, a developer in this scenario would go ahead with the project. And all of this is theoretical. There are lots of things that come into play in terms of, individual developments and stuff, but everything that we have and the feasibility analysis is something that likely a lender would finance.
But is the lender piece in there that they have it, lender A would finance this project? Is that in the feasibility study or the analysis? Just because I want to go forward with a project doesn't mean I'm getting financed.
Right. Mike, to the best of no. The RKG and Associates didn't go to an equity provider and say, would you fund this hypothetical project? But they did know what equity providers were requiring in the market at that time and said, yes, this project would be feasible and an equity provider would invest in it.
Yeah, that's the same. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, additional questions or comments from the board? Okay, I do have one more. This is kind of going to be my theme for the meeting, right? We don't know what we can't tell the future. We won't know if the outcome of this, but we're hoping for the outcome of maintaining our community, right? And making sure we can all participate in this great city. So with that, because we don't know what will happen, what are the kind of control and regular review mechanisms by which we are going to assess this? Whose responsibility is this? I mean, I think I kind of know the answer, but I want to confirm. Whose responsibility is this to analyze, is this working or is it not? And if we saw that it wasn't, what will we do?
Thank you, Chair. So we've put a couple of things into place with which to analyze that. First and foremost, having this be a part of the zoning code provides us with the flexibility to come back and to say, hey, we need to make this change. Secondly, we are putting an effective date of October 1st, 2024 into the policy intentionally. We want to make sure that we're continually monitoring the market and having a really good understanding of the direction within which it is going. And delaying the implementation of this policy will help us do that and help us make sure that we do have a good understanding of the direction that the market's going in, so that we're ensuring that everyone who's impacted by this text amendment is set up for success at the time that it goes live.
Okay. So I understand the delay, but just kind of the regular monitoring, right, of this. That's the piece that I wanted to just get clarity on. How are we going to regularly monitor whether or not this is working?
If I could add, every year, and I'm speaking now for the BPDA, so pardon me, but every year the BPDA does do a yearly review of the IDP or IZ program, what it's produced, what type of housing is produced, where it's produced, and it's it's been a really successful program. Thanks to all of you. So those yearly reports will continue, and if we're seeing a downturn in the number of units produced, if we're seeing projects not being produced in certain neighborhoods, right? I think in that process, in that report, which is done every single year, it would be very, very good information to collect and analyze. And it would certainly be of interest to all of us, certainly interest to me and interest to the BPDA, to dive into that information, figure out what is working and what's not. And if something does need to be adjusted, we could certainly do that. So that is something that I feel very comfortable, saying live and because it's important to all of us that we get this right.
Absolutely, and it's important that I say I'm comfortable with that process as well, that the report that I look forward to every year reading and printing out and referencing it to stay on top of this, right? So that more to say that there's lots of eyes on this and they will continue to be on this, and we know it's more than just an annual basis, but like at the very least we can rest assured that we're going to get a report out on the results of the program. So additional questions or comments from the board? All right, hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Lansmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thanks, team. Okay. Item number 7. Request authorization to execute and deliver a memorandum of agreement with the City of Boston, acting by and through its Property Management Department, authorizing the services of and payment for physical security and emergency response services provided by the Municipal Protective Services and Municipal Operations for properties owned by the Boston Redevelopment Authority. Laura.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to return before you. The details of our partnership with the Municipal Protective Services through this memorandum of agreement with the City of Boston's Property Management Department are consistent with my presentation to the EDIC board earlier today. The key locations for the BRA MOA include BPDA staff offices and are open to the public along with other uses. Specifically, I'll highlight the China Trade Center located at 2 Boylston, which is home to the Chinatown branch of the Public Library and a variety of other tenants, as well as BPDA offices at 7 Palmer Street, which offer tax preparation services to the public every spring, and they've really appreciated the support of the munis during that time. The estimated budget for the BRA MOA is $450,457 approximately per year. With that, thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions and comments from the board? Hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Lansmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Okay, item number 8. Request authorization to extend the tentative designation status of Powerhouse CNY LLC to facilitate the long-term lease of the BPDA-owned Building 108 property in the Charlestown Navy Yard. Emma.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. We are requesting board approval to extend the tentative designation of Powerhouse CNY for the development and long-term lease of Building 108 in the Charlestown Navy Yard. Building 108 was a vacant building of approximately 32,000 square feet that previously served as the central power plant of the Charlestown Navy Yard. Following board approval in December 2020 for a construction contract with S&R Corporation, the abatement and demolition of the building was substantially completed in spring of this year. The BPDA originally issued an RFP for the redevelopment of Building 108 in November of 2019. And subsequently, the BPDA rejected both proposals that it received and reissued the RFP in September 2020 with strengthened and clarified diversity and inclusion evaluation criteria. In October 2020, the BPDA received 2 proposals in response to the reissued RFP. The proposal submitted by Powerhouse CNY LLC was determined to be the most highly advantageous for its ability to execute the project presented, its design and development program, its diversity and inclusion plan, and its financial offer. In February of 2021, BPDA board approved the tentative designation of Powerhouse CNY for the redevelopment of Building 108. Subsequently, in July of 2022, the board approved a 12-month extension of the developer's tentative designation status. For the redevelopment, Powerhouse CNY proposes a 97,000 square foot building with approximately 84,000 rentable square feet of lab and R&D space and 1,700 rentable square feet of cafe space with 39 below-grade parking spaces. Since being granted tentative designation, The development team has made significant progress, including submitting a PNF through the Article 80 process, pursuing financing, beginning community outreach, and executing a term sheet with the BPDA. During the requested 6-month extension until January 31st of 2024, the development team plans to finalize negotiations of the long-term ground lease, continue to pursue commitments from equity investors, construction and permanent financing, and prospective tenants, continue the Article 80 community process, and file all necessary applications with the Massachusetts Historic Commission. Pending completion of due diligence by the developer and the successful negotiation of a lease agreement and evidence of financing commitment, BPDA staff will return to the board to request final designation. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Lansmark?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 9, request authorization to adopt the resolution entitled Resolution of the Boston Redevelopment Authority regarding minor modification to the Charlestown Urban Renewal Area, project number Mass R-55, with respect to parcel R26C along 9 Sackville Street in Charlestown. And also to enter into an amended and restated land disposition agreement for parcel R-26C with Eric Zachrison for use as a redeveloped residential development and to take all related actions. Christopher.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Christopher Breen. I'm your Urban Renewal Manager. Thank you for your time. Before you, as stated, is a minor modification to the Charlestown Urban Renewal Plan for parcel R26C along 9 Sackville Street in Charlestown within Boston. This minor modification reflects the increase in height for the newly redeveloped home, going from a previous 25 feet to a 35 feet, which allows the urban renewal plan to then match the neighborhood zoning compliances for the area. The amended and restated LDA will reflect 9 Sackville going from a single-family restriction under the LDA to a new sort of 2-family residence with that restriction, as well as a subsequent incremental value fee on the new unit that is created above. The project did go before the Zoning Board of Appeals for that rear setback and was approved a couple months ago, and is now prepared to move forward with their renovation sort of build out in the rear. I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Christopher. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Lansmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Motion passes. Okay, item number 10, request authorization to petition the Public Improvement Commission with the Asian Community Development Corporation to conduct specific repairs on Hudson Street and Tyler Street, and to petition the PIC the Public Improvement Commission, PIC, to grant a pedestrian easement to the city of Boston on the portions of the site that are adjacent to the sidewalks on both Hudson and Tyler Street, and to take all related actions. Emma.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the board. Today we are requesting board authorization to petition the Public Improvement Commission along with Asian Community Development Corporation for specific actions to complete the redevelopment plan for parcel R1. The BPDA-owned parcel R1 consists of approximately 18,915 square feet of vacant land in the South Cove urban renewal area in Chinatown, and is comprised of 14 contiguous assessors parcels, bounded by a vacant parcel to the south, Tyler Street to the west, Hudson Street to the east, and bordered to the north by the rear of 75 Neeland Street. After a robust community process, the BPDA issued an RFP for parcel R1 in August 2021, with proposals due in October of 2021. Based on extensive review and evaluation with the community, the proposal from Asian Community Development Corporation was selected as the most highly advantageous. Accordingly, in April 2022, the board approved the tentative designation status of Asian CDC for the redevelopment of parcel R1. The development team proposes a 12-story structure with 110 residential units, all of which are income restricted to a variety of income levels. The project will also add approximately 17,000 square feet of community use space for the Chinatown branch of the Boston Public Library. In order for the planned development and proposed public realm improvements to be completed, 3 actions must be taken by the BPDA as the landowner through the Public Improvement Commission. The first and second actions are to conduct specific repairs on Hudson Street and Tyler Street, including new cement concrete sidewalk with permeable pavers, irrigation, street lighting, street trees, bike racks, and granite curbing. The third action is to grant a pedestrian easement to the City of Boston on the portions of the site that are adjacent to the sidewalks on both Hudson and Tyler Streets. The easement will allow the areas in question to function as public sidewalks. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Hansmark?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 11, request authorization to issue a preliminary adequacy determination waiving further review pursuant to Article 80B Large Project Review of the Boston Zoning Code for the construction of up to 254 residential rental units, approximately 1,875 square feet of retail space, up to 305 bicycle storage spaces, and a maximum of 63 off-street vehicle parking spaces located at 76 Ashford Street, and to issue a certification of compliance upon successful completion of the Article 80 review process, and to take all related actions. Nick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Director Jemison, Secretary Polhimas. We are here before you this evening to present the proposed project at 76 Ashford Street. Located in Alston, near Packard's Corner, the proponents of the project seek to demolish the existing building occupying the project site and construct a 17-story, approximately 85 gross square foot mixed-use building, achieving a LEED Gold score that will include 254 rental housing units, 36 of which have been designated as affordable units, including a number of 2+ bedroom units and approximately 1,875 square feet of retail space. Importantly, the project site is located next to the future West Station, a key future multimodal connection between Alston, Lower Alston, and the new I-90. Through extensive work with our transportation planning staff, MassDOT, and the development team, half of the site has been reserved to be sold to the future, in the future to MassDOT for the construction of West Station. The developers have agreed that the money from the sale, expected to be near $4.5 million, will be placed into the IDP fund for use in the Alston-Brighton neighborhood. In addition to the contributions to the future West Station and IDP contributions, the project will bring a number of other benefits to the area, including improved street and pedestrian conditions around the project site, additional street trees, and money for the upkeep of Penman Park. Before I have the development team take you through the project, I'll have Joe Blankenship take you through the planning context. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Good evening, Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, Director Jemison, and members of the board. My name is Joe Blankenship, and I'm a Senior Transportation Planner for the Alston and Brighton neighborhoods. The proposed project is located within the Alston-Brighton Mobility Study Area, which focuses on increasing safe, multimodal mobility for all. During review of this project, BPDA staff considered future conditions proposed by the Alston Multimodal Project, also known as the I-90 Interchange Project, proposed by the Massachusetts DOT, which includes the realignment of highway infrastructure and the creation of a new commuter rail station known as West Station, which will be directly adjacent to the proposed project. The proposed project contributes to the creation of transit-oriented development described in the Alston-Brighton Mobility Study and is key to the success of the Alston multimodal project by offering to set aside the necessary land on its parcel to connect to the future West Station to neighborhoods south via Brighton Avenue and Commonwealth Avenue via the extension of Malvern Street. This extension will serve as a dedicated transitway and a dedicated bike ped corridor. The committed land for this project is critical to the success of future West Station. While the project will need relief from the Zoning Board of Appeals, the project provides the space for major multimodal infrastructure improvements that will benefit not only the Alston-Brighton neighborhoods, but the region as a whole. The project team should continue to coordinate with the City of Boston, Massachusetts DOT, and the MBTA to ensure that the alignment with ongoing planning efforts continues. I'll now turn it over to the proponent to begin their presentation.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Secretary Polimis, Director Jemison, Attorney Jeff Drago with Drago and Toscano, here on behalf of the applicant and developer, City Realty. You will hear from Josh Fetterman, one of the principals, in a few moments from City Realty, and also D'Artagnan Brown from Embark that will take you through the plans portion. We are excited to be here today for this long-awaited project. Since acquisition up until the project that we're showing you tonight, it has been the better part of 5 years that we've worked with Mass DOT and the state, the City of Boston, as well as the community to get to the project that we're showing you tonight. This project, as was mentioned, is in an industrial corridor next to Boston University's fields and some industrial parcels. And there is now a residential component across the way as well. The project that we're showing you, the proposal is to demo the existing one-story industrial parcel, and we would be creating a mixed-use residential building, which my client felt was more conducive and would revitalize this section of Alston. The unit count would be 254 residential units with 13,810 square feet of amenity space. It would also include 1,875 square feet of ground story retail space as well, with 63 associated parking spaces. This project would also have 312 bike parking spaces on site. This project has a strong affordable component as well. As was mentioned, not only would this project have IDP units on site, but also a substantial contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund, and one of the commercial units on this building would also be dedicated at an affordable rent to a local commercial tenant of the Alston area. Also, this project is ideally built for those commuters. As was mentioned, this project is going to be the gateway to the West Station. It also encourages other modes of transportation by bike parking on site, donating to a blue bike station, and it's also a short walking distance to the MBTA Green Line as well. As part of our process, we had a strong community outreach. We had 2 Article 80 public meetings held by the BPDA, 4 impact advisory group meetings, and multiple meetings with both the Alston Civic Association as well as the Brighton Alston Improvement Association as well, to get to the project that we're showing you tonight. If we could go to the next slide as well. This just shows you a contact site. You can see our location highlighted in pink and how close that is to the proposed West Station behind us. At this time, I'd like to turn the project over to Josh Fetterman, one of the principals of City Realty.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, members of the board, and Director Jemison. I'll keep it brief. Just having worked on this project since late 2018, we're very excited to present to you tonight and share with you. It's really been a a great experience working with all of our local civic associations, civic leaders, the task force members, and it's been great to see the project evolve over these years, and we're really excited about this key pivotal transportation infrastructure to kind of create that north to south bridge that is not there. So it's just thank you again for your time tonight, and we look forward to sharing with you.
I would now turn it over to D'Artagnan Brown to go over his slides.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. D'Artagnan Brown from Embark. Again, as Josh and Jeff mentioned, it's been a robust process, and we've had a lot of great input that's helped shape the site. Just by quick context, as mentioned, our site is outlined in pink here that really serves as a unique opportunity to connect to the future West Station. That's really played into how we've shaped the massing and strategy of the site. If you go to the next slide, please. You can see part of our study, working closely with the BPDA and BCDC, was just how this taps into the future West Station and all of kind of what Harvard and the Beacon Yards will set up to be long-term. In the next slide, please. This is just the site today as it exists, so just the view down Ashford Street in Malvern. Part of what you can see here in this area is really what will be a 60-foot access way provided on our site to the future West Station. Next slide, please. And this is denoting that area. So the area itself makes up close to half of the site. And so that, again, will provide, and through a lot of coordination with the various agencies, access up to the future West Station, which is on page right. Next slide, please. A couple things that we've worked really closely on figuring out is both the interim condition and the long-term condition, future condition of what this would entail. And being cognizant just of the surrounding context and being able to provide and really design for a buffer that will maintain its integrity long-term. In the short-term interim, we would use this space really for future staging of West Station. And then, if you don't mind, go to the next slide, please. Once West Station is built and up and running, what we've done is really allowed ample programming space from pedestrian walkways, bike, and then bus access to and from all within this zone. And then, sorry, actually we can stay here. And part of the programming too was just really how to get a very vibrant ground floor of the building, so full kind of exposure along the entire side to the two retail spaces that will face the future West Station. Next slide, please. And then this section at the top of the page is really understanding today's built condition with kind of the future growth outline here, putting in the infrastructure in place that would allow us to essentially connect up to a West Station. One thing I didn't mention earlier, but there will be a grade change to connect, so we've allowed or planning from that for day one. And then in the lower section, kind of the future build condition would allow this infrastructure kind of buffering to stay in place and then tap into that to allow the kind of long-term condition. Next slide, please. And then we have a series of views essentially just inserting our building into the context of, the greater neighborhood. And so this is the current Mass Pike as it exists today, future straightening out as it will happen down the road with West Station coming right here. Our building positioned right here to the right. Next slide, please. And then as we spin around and come and look back to our site, so as we mentioned, we're abutting the BU Student Village. This is the field house, our building position there. Next slide, please. And then just as you're looking west from Ashford Street to our building, worked very closely again with both the BPDA and BCDC to work through the architectural expression of the building, as it really will become a beautiful gateway to the West Station. So just making sure the quality and the detailing of the architecture is there. Next slide, please. And then as we come looking northwest from Gardner Street back to our site. Next slide, please. And then this is the future build condition with the access up to West Station, our building with that kind of robust programming, and then the residential units springing from above. And I think with that, I'll turn it back to you, Jeff, and we appreciate everyone's time.
Yep, I think that would conclude our presentation, and we can answer any questions the board may have. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Right, hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Seconded.
We'll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Lance Mark?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Congratulations. Looks like a great project. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Item number 12. Request authorization to issue a determination waiving the requirement of further review pursuant to Section 80B Large Project Review of the Boston Zoning Code for the construction of 300 hotel rooms, 5,500 square feet of retail space, and 24 bicycle spaces for the Stanhope Hotel project located at 39 Stanhope Street, and to issue a certification of compliance upon successful completion of the Article 80 review process and to take all related actions. Quinn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Secretary Paulimas, and Director Jemison. The proposal before you is for an Article 80 large project known as the Stanhope Hotel. The project is located at 39 Stanhope Street near Back Bay Station. The project is an approximately 124,000 square foot, 21-story, 300-key hotel with restaurant space at the ground floor. The project will be compliant with the Stewart Street District zoning and will be making a $450,000 contribution to support a Boston Transportation Department effort to explore improvements to a section of Stanhope Street adjacent to the project as a pedestrian plaza. The project will also incorporate the facade of the existing 2-story brick Staples building on the site into the design of the hotel. The BPDA held a virtual IAG meeting for this project on May 3rd, 2022, a virtual public meeting on May 5th, 2022, and a virtual joint IAG and public meeting on June 8th, 2023. All meetings were well attended and the public meetings were advertised in the local newspaper and online. I want to thank the BPDA staff, IAG members, and members of the public who contributed their time and efforts to improving this project through the course of our review. I also wanted to note that we've received letters of support from this project, from City Council President and District 2 City Councilor Ed Flynn, as well as at-large councilors Louis Jean and Murphy. I'll now turn it over to my colleague Ted Schwartzberg from the BPDA Planning Division to discuss the planning context that is considered in the review of this project before the development team begins their presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Quinn. Good evening, Chair Rojas, members of the board. I wanted to present first the Stewart Street Planning Study that was adopted by the then BRA board in October 2015 and then subsequently adopted the next year as zoning Article 48 that Quinn mentioned. The key goals of that planning study were searching for a place where it's appropriate for Back Bay to grow and also looking at the public realm improvements needed to accommodate that growth. And that included in the zoning a 0.5% construction cost contribution for either public realm improvements or for public art. It encouraged ground floor uses that were active. At the parcel scale, it looked at preservations of National Register eligible buildings. And then at the district scale, the preservation story was also relevant in that north of Boylston Street, that's the area that is the historic architectural district where height is less appropriate, but south of Boylston Street in the Stewart Street corridor, not only is it not in that historic landmark district, but it's also the part of the neighborhood that is best served by transit and most appropriate for new growth. On the next slide, you'll see that this is a great example, and I'm, as a planner, really excited to present this project because it's a really excellent manifestation of this team's planning efforts a few years ago in the built form, hopefully. And you can see this is the base of the hotel tower. The growth that I mentioned earlier, this is a 21-story building, but it's essentially across the street from an Orange Line commuter rail and Amtrak station. Early on in our review process, we strongly suggested to the proponents that they consider the 0.5% of construction costs for public realm to be part of their program rather than public art. And through our review process, we worked to develop with this team the public plaza that you see before you. That would be an extension of Garcia Park. In terms of the historic preservation at the parcel scale that I mentioned earlier, the historic stables building that is there now is being, the facade is being preserved and integrated into the proposed program. And then the hotel uses that Quinn mentioned earlier will activate and animate the ground floor in a manner that's consistent with the planning guidelines. So with that, I'll now turn it over to the proponents to present their project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ted. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Director Jemison, and Secretary Paul Hemus. I'm Don Weiss, the permitting counsel for the project. In a moment, I will turn our presentation over to our design lead, Harry Wheeler of Group 1 Architects. But I'd like to make a couple of preliminary comments. One, on behalf of the team, I'd like to extend our personal appreciation to our project manager, Quinn Valsich. This is a by right project, as you've just heard from Quinn and Ted. One might therefore think it was a relatively straightforward project, but it ended up being actually quite complicated. We had very clear communication consistently all the way through from Quinn. There were a lot of expectations placed on this project, but we always understood exactly what those were. And when we needed access to city resources, because we need to coordinate with a number of different city departments, we always got those meetings, the right people were at them, and we had just very effective, very productive meetings, and that's led to the project you're about to see. So thank you very much, Quinn. Secondly, this project had a couple unusual complicating factors. One is that a preference emerged in discussions with the city early on to retain the existing 1.5-story brick stables building, sort of a cottagey red brick building in style, to build a modern 21-story commercial building above and bring it up through. A building like that while retaining its facade is like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, but about times 100. And in addition, as Ted just mentioned, the Transportation Department has had a vision of turning Stanhope Street, which is relatively low traffic from an auto standpoint, into a pedestrianized plaza, and thinking about how a hotel would work in conjunction with that change from an operational standpoint, also from an aesthetic standpoint, and how it would tie to the park, was also a complicated challenge. The team did preliminary design work in very close consultation with BPDA staff and with BTD staff. Although that is a separate project from ours, it's obviously very closely coordinated, and that coordination produced some really wonderful results. So we've been fortunate on this project to have an extremely strong design team. We expect the board is going to be very proud of the beauty and elegance of this project once completed. And without further ado, I'll turn the presentation over to Harry Wheeler of Group 1.
Thank you, Don, members of the board. Again, to echo Don's comments, I want to appreciate and thank everybody from the BPDA, BCDC, Boston Landmarks, and all the staff that was worked with us along through getting this project to where it is today. So with that, I'll quickly go through the project. If we can jump to the next slide. Our site is outlined here in yellow and blue on Stanhope Street, the existing Red Lantern site opposite Frida Garcia Park, between Clarendon Street and on Stanhope Street. Next slide. Some existing photos of the existing stable building with the Stanhope Street currently in the condition it is today with vehicular access. Our project on the top left slide runs from the tall brick building up to the Friendly Toast to the green roof line. Our site is the mansard roof within the red shingled roof within the Red Lantern sign. So we have our view on the top left from Stanhope Street. On the top right, we have the rear of our building, the 2-story brick facade from the alley. And then we have some east and west photos of Stanhope Street and our back alley on the bottom. Next slide, please. So as it exists today, again, opposite the Frida Garcia Park, you can see here we have outlined in green the entrances to the park. On the northern edge of Stanhope Street in blue are the existing entrances and doorways to the facades along Stanhope Street. And on the right-hand side, we show some garage access and parking areas for our adjacent neighbor, which were all part of the planning context as we looked at the pedestrianization of Stanhope Street. On the next slide, please. So working with our landscape team and the city and BTD, we have developed this pedestrianization plan, which is an extension really of the Frida Garcia Park to engulf Stanhope Street and make it pedestrian friendly, accentuating the entrances to the Frida Garcia Park, bringing those across the way to actually match and align with the entrances of our proposed hotel building, allowing lots of activation and spill out of the retail frontages along the northern edge of Stanhope Street, and then the park to spill out along the southern edge. So with mixtures of patterns, materials, and accent colors, really creating a live, vibrant, energetic pedestrian realm with addition of adding new street trees along the northern side and an additional tree and planting bed where you can see our car drop-off loading zone for guest access, which is now the new intersection of Connors Place and Stanhope Street. You can see the 3 cars parked there now. About 50 feet away, about 50 feet away from our front door, but a good entrance to the, to the hotel and the ground floor restaurant. Next slide, please. So going through these slides pretty quickly, just to show the activation along Stanhope Street as we, again, incorporated the stable building. On the bottom part of the page, you can see the extra thick wall, which is the existing brick facade. Behind that will be our activated lobby and entrance to our restaurant, which is actually a 2-story restaurant, which you'll see on the next slide. Here, so the restaurant is actually the 1st and 2nd floor. So the entire existing retained stable building will be activated on both levels with new 24-hour activation, light, animation, et cetera, really bringing that stable building to a new vibrancy, which has been kind of quiet up until now. On the next slide, which is the new and the 1st floor above the existing stable building, we wanted to create a breathing room or a little recess space between the new architecture and the existing. Again, working with landmarks, we know that we're very sensitive to this dimension. So we created some public space and amenity space along with an exterior terrace at this level to provide us that separation, which we'll see in our upcoming rendering. Next slide. Typical hotel room floor. Again, we have up to 300 hotel rooms within our 21-story building. Very dense floor plan, again, bringing all of our core to the middle. You'll see in this plan we do have some party walls on the east and west facades, which were a very key point of our design conversation with BCDC to make sure that these sidewalls are in fact architecturally treated and part of the overall design concept. Next slide, please. On the top floor, we do have some meeting space and club room, as well as an exterior terrace, south-facing to the park and also to the south. Next slide. Which we get our first step view of the new rendering with the proposed pedestrian realm improvements. We are looking right at our guest drop-off zone. You can see the new awnings, the restored or retained facade of the Stanhope Street stables, the activated uses behind it, so that stable building is now very lit up and activated, which it really kind of exemplifies in the architecture that we're retaining. The meeting space, which provides our exterior terrace and the separation between the new architecture above and the existing below. On the next slide, which shows our further back view. This is from Columbus, so we can see over the park looking at the building. Again, this gridded facade, which really ties into the architecture around the neighborhood, but also brings back a more of a modern context to the architecture on the Pope building and these gridded facades and boxier window fenestrations. Also bringing that to the sides of the building with some recesses and some architectural elements along the side, capped all by our rooftop element, and you can see the notch out for our corner, which is our exterior terrace. So really great, again, as Don mentioned, several years of design conversation working with all the agencies. We're very happy with this outcome. Happy to answer any questions you have, and thank you very much. This is our last slide.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the board?
Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, before we do that, yeah, thank you, Secretary Polhemus. We have, before we take questions from the board, We have Paul Sullivan here from Councilor Flaherty's office to say a few words. So Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the board, Secretary Polimis, Director Jemison, Paul Sullivan, Chief of Staff to City Council at Large, Michael Flaherty. The council would go on record in strong support of this project. He was impressed by not only the preservation of the facade, but also the improvements to the plaza, as well as alleviating the need for more hotel rooms. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Now let's go to questions or comments from the board. Okay. Just want to say I'm really excited for this project. It's one of my favorite little parts of the city where I used to eat my lunch. So I appreciate all the time and coordination that you and the team did to create what I think is going to be a pretty cool space. So,
thank you.
With that, motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
We'll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Mr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take one more here. Item number 13. Request authorization to issue a scope and determination waiving further review pursuant to Article 80A-6.2 of the Boston Zoning Code for the construction of 279 residential rental units, including 46 IDP units, 3,617 square feet of retail space, and up to 279 garage parking spaces for the residences at Reedville Station project located at 1717 through 1725 Hyde Park Avenue, and to issue one or more certifications of compliance or partial certifications of compliance upon successful completion of the Article 80 review process, and to take all related actions. And Camille.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the board, Director Jemison, and Secretary Polhemus. My name is Camille Platt. I'm a project manager at the BPDA. The proposed project before you is an Article 80 notice of project change located at 1717 to 1725 Hyde Park Avenue, known as the Residences at Reedville Station in Hyde Park. The proposed project site is comprised of an approximately 2.75 acre area of land located at 1717 to 1719 Hyde Park Ave in Boston, adjacent to the MBTA Reedville Community Station. The site fronts Hyde Park Avenue to the east and is bounded by an industrial property to the north, the MBTA station to the west, and the Father Hart Bridge on Milton Street to the south. The proponent proposes demolition of the existing vacant industrial building on the site and the new construction of a single apartment building with approximately 279 multifamily dwelling units, approximately 3,617 square feet of ground floor local retail or restaurant space, up to 279 off-street garage and surface vehicle parking spaces, a private pocket park open to the public, usable open space patios, related amenities, and other site and public realm improvements. A prior version of the Residences at Reedville Station received an Article 80B large project review approval vote on December 17, 2020, at the time proposing two buildings with approximately 273 multifamily dwelling units to be offered as a mix of rental and homeownership units. The proponent revised the Residences at Reedville Station proposal and submitted the MPC to the BPDA on February 8th of 2023. The BPDA hosted a virtual public meeting regarding the MPC on March 13th of 2023. The public meeting was advertised in the local paper, a notice was posted on our calendar, and an email notification was sent out to all subscribers of the BPDA's Hyde Park Neighborhood email update list. The comment period was then extended and concluded on June 1st of 2023. I'd like to thank the public elected officials in the Hyde Park community who have worked within the Article 80 process over the last year or so on the MPC itself, and I will now turn it over to Jan with the development team to begin their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille, Madam Chair, Director Jemison, Secretary Polimis, members of the board. My name is Jan Steenbrugge. I represent Admiliora, the developer and owner of the Hyde Park site. When we received approval from this board in 2020, we had every intention to complete a project with a healthy number of home ownership units. But over the past 2.5 years, we have been unable to find the equity or the financing for the home ownership component. and have reluctantly come back to this board for approval to shift to an all rental project. In doing this, we have been happy to add 5 more affordable units, bringing the total affordable from 41 to 46. And we have also taken this opportunity to reconfigure the building to address one of the main criticisms we heard during the public meetings, that our massing was too big. We reduced the massing. Me and my team are here to answer any and all of your questions, and if it's okay with the chair, I would like to hand it over to our architect, Mike Doherty from TAT.
Thanks, Jan. I'll just walk you through a brief presentation highlighting the changes from the approved project to the currently proposed project. The site plan, we're a former industrial site right next to the Reedville station, so it's ideally situated for transit-oriented design. It was 2 buildings. It's one connected building now that a floor has been removed, as Jan mentioned. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here we're going to show you a sort of a before and after. This was the 2-building proposal, Hyde Park running in front of the project, the Milton Street and the Father Hart Bridge going over the tracks, which are the low point of the site. The building as proposed was 5 stories as seen from the public way. And the next slide will show you sort of the current proposal. So this is the current proposal. You see it's reduced by a floor and the buildings have been connected for a single building. Next slide, please. This is a site plan showing the unified single building. You can see the arrival and drop-off area at the Pocket Park is right along sort of the center of the project along Hyde Park Avenue. That's at elevation 88. There's a privatized courtyard at elevation 77 for the residents, and then the tracks are down another 15 feet below that along the northern side of the page, Milton Street and the Father Hart Bridge to the left. Next slide, please. This gives a little bit of detail of the Pocket Park, showing it'll be a pleasant space to sit, and it'll be a nice, breakout zone along Hyde Park Avenue. This will be maintained and owned by the owner, but fully open to the public. And we're looking at incorporating some memorialization of the former WPA wall that is in various states of disrepair along the edge of the current site, and we're going to save it where we can, and then we're going to repurpose some of those materials into this park design as a way of memorializing that. Next slide, please. These are, again, before and after drawings. The top drawing is a section through the site where it goes from the high point on Hyde Park Avenue, drops down to the courtyard in the middle, and then on the left is the lowest portion of the project where it abuts the train tracks, the MBTA and commuter line tracks. The lower drawing is the currently proposed. You can see dashed in, the story has been reduced, and you can also see that the gap between the 2 buildings has been filled in, and that's where you see the units in that section drawing. The parking garage now connects across as well. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to show you some current views of the current proposal, but again, dashed in the previous height. This is from coming down Hyde Park Avenue from the north, looking towards the south as you approach the site. Next slide, please. And this is from the opposite direction, Father Hart Bridge and Milton Street going off to the left, Hyde Park Ave going up to the right. You can see there's some up and down to the grading of the site. And you can also see the WPA wall I mentioned that we're going to preserve where it abuts the bridge and where it begins to turn the corner there. And again, dashed in is the previous proposal that was approved before. Next slide. And then we're going to do another before and after shot. So this was the approved design from before, and you can see it was a 5-story building along Hyde Park Avenue. This is the arrival court with the Pocket Park sort of on the left, proposed restaurant on the right with cafe seating outdoors. And you can see it was a 5-story building, as I mentioned. So the next slide will sort of toggle that and show the new. So you can see now it's proposed as a 4-story building along the public way. Thank you. And by connecting the two, we were able to recapture not all, but most of the square footage lost. So we didn't lose unit count. And as Jan mentioned, we were able to pump up the number of IDP units. And I think we have one more image, and it's, I guess that was it. So we should open it up to questions.
Okay, any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I've got a comment. When you came to us initially, I was really excited about the home ownership possibility, so our residents can use that opportunity to build wealth. So I'm disappointed that the home ownership is not there. Could you tell me the main reasons why that wasn't able to come together, the reason the financing wasn't able to take place with the home ownership component?
It's okay if I take that question? It's impossible to know 100% certain. I can only go by what they tell me. The number one thing I heard was the lack of comps in the direct area. So that there is no condo building anywhere close to that where they could directly comp on, and that alone was I think one of the biggest hurdles. There is no established condo market in that area at all, and the market is already skittish as is, and to go into a new area, the Frontier, this is the first building in hopefully a whole development of this block. They want an established market that proves that people want to live there, that people are going to take the train to work, that the MBTA is going to do their part and upgrade that service before they take the risk. With rents, if you don't hit the initial number, you might hit it in year 5 or year 10, but at some point you'll hit your number. With condos, if you don't hit the number, you're doomed, right? So there's much more risk in a condo part than there is in the rental part, and that is what I heard, and that's the feedback I got. Is that helpful?
Very helpful. I know it's beyond your control, but that's helpful, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Additional questions or comments? I actually have one question. What was the change in, I think you said that the units stayed about the same, but what was there any change in units for the reduction of the story, that dotted line space everywhere?
Yes, we revised the mix to be more heavy on the smaller units so that we didn't lose a bunch of units. And so it was really by rejiggering the demising walls and the unit types that we were able to preserve the unit count.
Okay. If there are any other questions or comments, hearing and seeing none, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
We'll call for a vote. Mr. Monahan?
Aye.
Mr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for, being the first building over in that area, and, so I believe in that project, so.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Cheers. Okay, so it is 5:30 on the dot. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll start the public hearing portion of our meeting. So with that, we'll see you in 5 minutes, 5:35. Thanks.